Hello, and welcome to the Christ Baptist Church devotional going through the book of Genesis. We've made our way all the way through Genesis chapter 36, just seeing how God has begun with not just the creation of the world, but all the way through and choosing a man, Abraham, for no apparent reason. Just chose him out of all of the group of people who had rebelled against him when sin came into the world, and showed us that Abraham was justified by his faith for believing in what God had said, believing in God's promises, the promise of having many descendants and the promise of having a land. And so we've seen how God was faithful to Abraham in fulfilling his promise and providing a child when Abraham was 100 years old, his first child, and only one, the child of the promise, Isaac. Isaac then went and had two children, Jacob and Esau, who fought. And Jacob the younger ended up prevailing over Esau the older by God's providence, by God's choice, that the older will serve the younger, God had said, prophesied, and that's exactly what happened. We follow the life of Jacob as he went through growing up and found himself a wife, and he ended up not just getting a wife, but he ended up with two wives and their maidens, and the whole deal as he worked for his father-in-law for 21 years. His father-in-law tricked him and was deceptive in the same way that Jacob was. So Jacob's own sins had come back around and were haunting him, and the consequences of his sin. And so we see now, from chapter 36, we saw the generations of Esau, and now we're going to see the generations of Jacob. And from chapter 37 to chapter 50 is going to really contain the life of Joseph, who was Jacob's firstborn from Rachel, the woman he ultimately always wanted to marry, which he did, but she couldn't bear any children until she had Joseph. And this is about the life of Joseph. And but it's not just about the life of Joseph. It's going to be through this picture of the life of Joseph about God's faithfulness and how he brings Jacob's family together. They were very dysfunctional. They were a product of many wives and one man, and so there were different alliances, different allegiances, but God brings them all together through his providence in these next 14 chapters. Let's take a look and see what we've got here. Chapter 37, verse 1. Now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. So now this is talking about how God is preserving Jacob's family. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. So right away we see Joseph is the youngest. He's 17. The other brothers are going to be, could be close in their 30s now. They're quite a bit older. But there is brothers from the same father. And he's getting along with them, but he brings back a bad report to them, to their father. And something here, what we see is Joseph has a habit here that is actually coming from the sins of Jacob. And one thing we see from Jacob, as well as Jacob's father, Isaac, is we see preference. We see Isaac, who preferred Esau over Jacob. And it was evident when he wanted to bless Esau, even after Esau sold his birthright to Jacob, even after God prophesied that Esau will serve Jacob, Isaac tried to work it out so that he would bless Esau. But God, in his providence, made sure that didn't happen, and he actually ended up blessing Jacob instead because of Jacob's deception. Isaac favored Esau. Well, Jacob, he favored Rachel. He favored Rachel, his second wife, over all his other children, the wives of the maidens and the wives of Leah, the children of the maidens and the children of Leah. He favored Joseph because that was the son of his old age. That's what we see in verse 3. And so favoritism is very rampant in this family, where you're showing obvious more love for somebody else than another, and what that causes. And we see what happens here when you have favoritism. By the way, the book of James talks about it in James chapter 2 in the church. Don't show favoritism in the church, because this is what happens. Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. You see, he felt he was more prominent. He felt he was the son of Rachel, not the sons of these other women. And so he could bring a bad report. He could just tell what he knew. And he just went and just laid his heart out before his father. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a vari-colored tunic. So a long flowing robe with lots of colors. And he made him a special robe because he's Joseph. He loved him more, obviously, than, and that's just a product all the way from Isaac. Well, his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. And so they could see this, and it was generating hatred. And not only that, then Joseph had a dream. When he was told to his brothers, they hated him even more. So this hatred was building, and especially when Joseph says, I'm special, I had a dream. And he tells them the dream. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up, and also stood erect, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my head. Then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign over us? Are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. You see, Joseph, he was thinking about himself, not about his brother's relationship and that. Just because you have a dream doesn't mean you tell everybody all the time when you're the most prominent person in this dream, hey guys, you're going to bow down to me. Already there's hatred, already there's favoritism. And then he goes and says something that is not meant for them. He doesn't understand it himself. He just says, look, I'm going to be more prominent. And it's just building this hatred. Verse 9, now he had still another dream, and related it to his brothers, and said, lo, I've had still another dream. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. He related it to his father and to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream you've had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So he did the same thing to his father. He told his parents, his father and his mother, look, you're going to bow down to me. My brother's going to bow down to me. Isn't this great? Joseph was expressing what he saw as truth, the dreams that were coming into his mind, without any consideration of other people at all, any consideration of his family. Now, we're going to see this is all in the providence of God that's driving this action to happen, but Joseph really was still just thinking about himself in his special place because his father showed favoritism to him. So that's now happening, and this kind of an anger and a hatred was building in this family. Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. And he said to him, I will go. Then he said to him, go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. A man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are pasturing the flock. Then the man said, they've moved from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. So now here we have a typical family situation again. The brothers, they're older, they're more responsible, they're pasturing their father's flock in Shechem. Remember, Shechem was back when they were settling in Shechem, and that's when their sister Dinah got raped, and they wanted to settle in Shechem, but two brothers, Simeon and Levi, they went and they killed all of the people in Shechem for that grave offense. And so they had to leave Shechem because they were now the scourge of the town. So they were pasturing their flock in Shechem, in that area, just big fields out there. And so he went to go see, because Jacob knows he's going to get a full report from Joseph about the brothers for sure, because he would tell him everything he knew, because he was loyal to him. They had a relationship. And so he went there, and he went to Shechem, and he was wandering in the field, and he couldn't find anything. And I like what the Bible says. A man found him, just a man. There's a man out there. And he was wandering the field, and the man asked him, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "I'm looking for my brothers." And he said, "Oh, they moved not from here, they went to Dothan now." Was this just a man, or was this like just a man that Jacob wrestled with a few chapters back? We don't know. We don't know, it just says a man. But it's interesting that there would happen to be a man in the field, ready to meet Joseph, saying, "What are you looking for?" "My brothers." "Oh, no, I happen to know that they've moved on to Dothan." I'm going to tell you, God set it up so that there would always be somebody to tell Joseph how to get to his brothers, which he did. Verse 18, when they saw him from a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we'll say, 'A wild beast devoured him.' Then let us see what will become of his dreams." But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, "Let us not take his life." Reuben further said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit, that is in this wilderness, but do not lay hands on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father." So what we now see is this favoritism, this select unity, meaning I like these and I don't like this. I like these people, I don't like that person. I like my brothers, I don't like Joseph. This hatred of Joseph because he did not come from their mothers, they united. Sons of Leah and the sons of the two maids all had something in common. They weren't from Rachel. And so they didn't like Joseph. And then Joseph added fuel to the fire by explaining to them, explaining to his father about how bad they were, and then gave him these dreams, and he's in charge, he's over everything, and they're all bowing to him. Such pride, and their favoritism caused a hatred for their brother so much, they're willing to act on it. They're willing to act on it. That's what favoritism does. Favoritism, you could call it prejudice. Favoritism breeds hatred. And anytime you're breeding hatred, breeding a superiority, breeding something that you really have dislike for somebody else, dislike for your brother, when it grows so much, that hatred cannot be controlled. And now they're willing to act on it here. And so they came and said, "Let's kill him and throw him in one of the pits." They say, "A wild beast took him." But Reuben the firstborn, he rescued him and said, "Let's not take his life." And I think, why did Reuben do this? Was Reuben so honorable? Well, he wanted to rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father. See, Reuben found a way to maybe get over his other brothers, to get back in the good graces of his father, because we see what happened in Genesis 35, verse 22, that Reuben was caught having relations with his father's, one of his concubines, the maid of one of his, it was Bilhah's father's concubine, and Jacob heard about that. And so Reuben has some issues with his dad that he's got to get right. This would be a way to do it, by saying, "I rescued Joseph, the one you love, out of these yahoos that are here." And so Reuben had his own issues. So I'm trying to say, how can I get myself sorted out? And he convinced them. So it came about when Joseph reached his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the very colored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty without any water in it. They threw their brother right into the pit. Maybe it was 3 meters tall. Couldn't get into it. It was for collecting rain, so there was no water in this pit. They stripped him of his coat, the one that he loved so much, and they threw him in the pit, and then they said, "Let's go eat now." So they sat down to eat a meal. As they raised their eyes and looked, behold, the caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh on their way to bring them down to Egypt. So they're eating this meal. Joseph's over there in the pit, no doubt screaming, telling them, "Let me out, brothers. I won't give a bad report. I mean, we're brothers." Just pleading, telling them of previous experiences they had. What are you doing? Fear, no doubt. I can't get out of this pit. And they're eating. That's no problem. I'm having, I'm having some nice sheep. We're eating. He's crying. Judah then pipes up in verse 26, says to his brothers, "What profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. So Judah comes up, and again, for what reason we don't know, but he's saying, I think there's a chance we could actually make some money on this deal. Let's not just leave him. That doesn't make any sense. After all, he is our brother. He does appeal to the fact that we are related. Let's tone down our favoritism a bit. Let's tone down this idea of hatred some, and at least turn it to profit. Well, verse 28 says, then some Midianite traders passed by, so they pulled him up and lifted Joseph out of the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus they brought Joseph into Egypt. 20 shekels of silver, that's the price of a slave back then. They said, hey, here's a slave, don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Now all this is going on while Reuben was gone. They were eating and Reuben had left. So Reuben returned to the pit. Behold, Joseph was not in the pit, so he tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy's not there. As for me, where am I to go? So again, that's why we think Reuben he wanted to save Jacob, but so that he could get back to his father. He says, where am I going to go now? How do I get back to my father? I mean, you ruined my plan. Where am I to go? The boy's not there. So they didn't know what to do. How do I answer our father that Jacob's no longer here? I mean, that's a problem. See, they enacted an evil plan based on their hatred, but they had no idea where this plan was going. First, they threw him in a pit. They said, let's kill him. That way they can kill him, and we'll say a wild beast took him. Let's kill him. Reuben says, no, let's not kill him. He's our flesh and blood. And don't lay hands on him. You just, here, put him in the pit. And so they had him in the pit, but they didn't know what to do with him. And they're trying to figure out, then all of a sudden now they see traders coming. And so it started with them just saying, let's kill him and then bury him and say an animal got him. No, let's throw him in a pit, leave him alive. No, that's not going to work. Here come the Ishmaelites. Okay, let's sell him, make some money, which they did. But now what are we going to do? We got to come back, and Joseph certainly came with us, so somebody would have seen us. How are we going to tell our father? See, hatred has you going blindly without a plan, getting deeper in sin. And so now Reuben is upset because he can't enact his plan to make his father happy. So, verse 31, they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they sent the varicolored tunic and brought it to their father and said, we found this. Please examine it to see whether it's your son's tunic or not. Then he examined it and said, it is my son's tunic. Wild beasts had devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. So Jacob tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. Then all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, surely I'll go down to Sheol in mourning for my son. So his father wept for him. So they decided, here's our plan. We're going to he's off, Joseph's off with the Ishmaelites now. We'll take his coat, dip it in blood, look around, look like an animal attacked him, and go back and tell our father. Which they did. They handed the tunic to his father. Verse 33, he examined it. While he's examining it, they're all standing around, agreed on the plan. We will agree to tell our father that an animal killed Joseph, and that is a lie. It's a lie. They sold him as a slave. It shows the pattern here. Jacob deceived his father Isaac with a coat made by a goat and sheep, and deceived him as if he was the hunter. And now his sons are deceiving their father by a coat that has blood on it. Where did the sons learn deception? They learned from their father. And that was the trick they used, something that they got pretty good at because their father was pretty good at it. The deception is what came back on Jacob. But the bigger part here is their favoritism, the favoritism that Jacob had for Joseph, they saw, so they had favoritism for themselves against Joseph. This favoritism, this prejudice, this hatred that began to build, began to be so deep they were willing to kill. But there's something even worse. They were actually willing to act on their hatred against somebody, even if it meant they would hurt somebody they loved. That's what favoritism does, hatred of other people does. It says, I hate this person so much that I'm gonna cause them so much pain, I will actually cause the pain of somebody I love to be able to enact my hatred, to be able to express my hatred the way I want to express it. Ultimately, to get rid of Joseph. I would have wanted to kill him, but okay, I'll sell him and make money. But now I'm gonna lie to my father, and he's gonna be heartbroken, heart sore. But that doesn't matter because I got to express my hatred. That's what hatred does. It doesn't have us just hurt the one that we hate. We're willing to hurt the ones we love because our hatred is so strong. That's what this is telling us. The sons of Jacob were willing to hurt their father just so they could express their hatred on Jacob. That is really what is such a danger for us when we let the deceitfulness of sin make our hearts bitter, and hatred consumes us. And that's what happens, even to these who are the children of promise right here. It is such a danger. This is Satan. He is the liar and the father of lies, and he was a murderer from the beginning. This is his goal. This is what hatred does. When you aren't thinking loving your brother, loving God, this is where this leads. To where you're actually willing to hurt people that you love that had nothing to do with anything, but you're willing to hurt them so that you can express your hatred. That's what they did here in coming after this. So you see this, as well as Joseph at the very beginning, he was, in a way, had the same partiality, saying, yes, my mother's Rachel, the one that my father really loves, and I'm special. And so it caused him to be blind, to be thinking of things that would actually hurt and insult his brothers. So at the very beginning, he incited their hatred as well, by a bit of his arrogance and his explaining things without concerning at all what they were thinking or feeling. So that's what this chapter is showing. But in all of this, God is protecting what's happening. And very specifically, we've seen three men, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob here. Abraham, who was given a promise but told to wait, and his circumstances were showing that promise wasn't happening so fast. And so that was teaching patience. That was teaching waiting on God, teaching us about the value of saying, we're going to wait because God is trustworthy and he's faithful. And then we saw Isaac and he had his sons, Jacob and Esau, but Isaac as well saw the problems that would come with his choices and what he tried to do. God was still faithful in taking that through. And now we see Jacob, and when Jacob is taking us to Joseph, and what's our lesson going to be out of this? Is how God is still with his children of promise, even in extreme adverse circumstances. Extreme adverse circumstances. That's what's happening. That's where we're going with Joseph, because Joseph was sold as a slave. And I want to say the key to this chapter, when we see these, just this evil effects of favoritism, prejudice coming through here in verse 36. One word, meanwhile. Meanwhile. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. While all this deception is going on for Jacob, he thinks his son is killed. The sons are concocting a lie. They're getting away with it. Meanwhile, God is acting. And the Ishmaelites, the Midianites, are not going to take him off into some camp somewhere. They sold him in Egypt to a key person, Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard, who's going to prove how God is paving the way to take care of Joseph and ultimately to take care of all of the sons of Jacob and preserve the children of promise during a time of famine. That's what's going on. So all of this wickedness is happening, hatred is happening, murder in the heart is happening. Meanwhile, God is acting. Meanwhile, Joseph is on his way to be taken care of, but in adverse circumstances, but God is there taking care of the child of promise. That's what we see here in Genesis chapter 37, as we're making our way again through now the life of the sons of Jacob, how God's promises unfolding for the world. I hope you see us next as we hit Genesis chapter 38.